And we're live.
Good to see you, Jimmy.
Good to see you, Scott. So a few things that I want to, I guess specifically or initially, do you want to just kind of introduce Experience Fusion and what you guys are all about and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Experience Fusion is a performance development system. It's a company designed to increase performance within employees for employers. Our performance development system takes people from creating the fundamentals for being performant, whether you're well down that path or not. We go through the fundamental training, and then we break them into segments for individual contributors to continue to create the habits that breed performance throughout their life, and then for leaders to create an environment where those individuals can thrive. So it is a entire encompassing system that drives performance for an organization by driving individual performance within each employee.
Okay. So who would you say your ideal client is for that? Who's sort of perfect for your system?
It's funny because the big answer is everyone, right? I mean,
Sure.
who doesn't want to be performant no matter what you do in life?
Mm-hmm.
And this impacts inside and outside of life, which I'm sure we'll kind of get into as we go down this path. So the global answer is everyone, but that's not a good answer for our business. That doesn't define an ICP or anything.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
very productive. So we focus on a couple of key areas. One, relationships, right? People who have high interaction with other employees, right? Where you don't get to work in a silo, where you do have to collaborate with other leaders and or other individual contributors on a frequent basis. Externally, people who have high contact with customers, whether it's on a customer success side, a customer support side, or whether it's on a sales side
Mm-hmm.
or marketing side, right? And then third, executives, leaders, right? People who need to breed performance out of others, need to elicit performance out of others. That is the core component. So while we impact every employee, and while I say globally, we can work with everybody, we've focused specifically on those key groups, right? So customer success, sales, executive leadership in terms of key groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of key employees, anybody who has a real need for more effective relationships to be more performant in their job.
Well, who doesn't have a real need for more effective relationships and more productive relationships, especially, I mean, in the workplace and outside of the workplace?
Yeah. You're 100% on, because we talk about performance, right? That's what I've said. It's the
Yep.
easiest way to define our company. We improve performance with employees. But one of the biggest impactors of performance in people is stress.
Absolutely.
Just the stress you feel. And the key component, or a key component to our performance system, is continually building your ability to not only handle stress, but to mitigate the amount of stress that infiltrates your life, to influence the types of stress that influence your life by seeking out challenges rather than letting adversity find you, things like that.
Right. As a business owner, how would I quantify the value of working through your system and investing in that for my employees?
Really depends on the employee, right? Let's take a look at a common place where performance is pretty easily measured, right?
Okay.
Because that's part of the challenge, and
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But sales,
Okay.
kind of easy. You and I both lived that world. And part of the reason why I loved sales is because it's so quantifiable.
Yeah.
There is that scoreboard at the end of the game, whether that's monthly, weekly, quarterly, yearly, whatever it is.
Right.
And when you look at a sales rep, there's some key things on the high end of the KPIs and
Mhm.
on the low end where I'll show exact performance improvements and I'll talk to them specifically.
Right.
So let's look at the high end.
Okay.
Bottom line, closing deals, right? Well, when you have a elite performer,
Mm-hmm.
they are closing deals at what you believe to be the maximum throughput for that individual based on the amount of conversations they have, how effective those conversations are, how quickly they can navigate a sales cycle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you talk about that sales cycle length, that's a key indicator for your top performers. Who is moving things through the pipeline, getting yeses and nos as fast as possible. We will improve sales cycle length
Mm-hmm.
by creating the system that we have and by implementing the system within your sales reps, what you're creating is an absolute intentionality within their actions day in and day out that will improve the sales cycle length, shorten it.
Sure.
Okay. Let's look at another KPI. It's probably a middle ground KPI, right? It would be opportunity creation, right? Out of sales qualified lead. Right? This is going to be about effective communication. This is going to be about intentionality in the way that you communicate to gauge intrigue, right? And to get that sales qualified lead to continue down the path. It's understanding how people are talking to you, what their real value is, uncovering that value and tying your product to it. Sales 101.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our performance system will improve the number of sales qualified leads that turn into opportunities, because by going through this, you'll become more intentionally engaged. You'll lean in on the conversations. The eye contact will be there. Your intentionality in pulling out information will not be about an extrinsic paycheck. It'll be about the intrinsic connection that is tied back to an intrinsic purpose within a person. So you'll start to see more opportunities be created, and you'll see the sales cycle lengthen, shorten. Okay. Let's look on a real low end activity. One of the major impacts of stress, especially in what I'll call entry level sales positions like BDRs, right? Or lower level transactional account execs. Lower level might not be right, but transactional account execs who do kind of full cycle sales. The stresses of quota, the stresses of slow times, the stresses of the economy, the stresses of a pandemic, all of those build, relieve. But what about the stresses of, I had a bad day at home. I had a bad day with the kids. I didn't get to pay this bill. I just got this notice. Well, those can impact a day. And as we know as sales leaders, one day of prospecting missed is about 2 weeks worth of results down the line.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And by giving people the formula and the foundations and the success plan to be performant and build the habits to be performant, they will have less stress impact. They will have higher activity, not on necessarily a daily basis where you're going to go, oh, I went from 110 to 180 dials a day. No, I went from 1,000 dials a month, 1,500 dials a month, 2,000 dials a month to 2,500 dials a month.
Right.
Because 1 day or 2 days a month, I'm just more performant because I'm able to deal with those stresses. So in a sales easily quantified position, there's some areas that our company will impact directly. Now the key, and I'll tie this back to the other areas, we customize with each customer. So as we go through our performance development system, we'll work with each customer and each group within that customer to say, what are the KPIs that you want to see improvement on?
Okay.
And let's tie that back to how we work with your people to create the performance in those KPIs. So when you look at a less definable area,
Yeah.
marketing,
Marketing.
what you do, right?
Yeah. If it's a finance department, if it's I mean, there's so many things that are very difficult roles that are very difficult to quantify performance.
How do companies traditionally do that? Have you seen them do it?
I think it's very subjective in most cases. I mean, a lot of it could be based on productivity, but again, that would be based on the position or the role as well, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's very subjective, and I think that can be good and it can be bad.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of roles in companies are very subjective in their performance measurement.
Sure.
Right. And that's why we customize with each customer to say, hey, based on your group and what you have, what is the challenge?
Right.
Oftentimes, companies are doing assessments, employee experience assessments, employee satisfaction assessments, right? And they're doing anecdotal gathering of team information in reviews and performance reviews.
Still all very subjective.
All very subjective.
Yeah.
So when you look at areas outside of sales, when you look at areas outside of customer success, one of the things that isn't subjective is turnover rate.
Absolutely.
One of the things that isn't subjective is medical leave.
Right.
Especially for mental health or stress. the amount of time that people call out of work, the days they call out of work. These are direct KPIs that we will improve, which will improve the performance of that individual. Now, some companies have direct productivity or performance guidelines that they've instilled for groups because they've created algorithms or that allow them to say, here's how you measure productivity in a controller, in a finance group, right? We'll take that. We'll take your productivity measures. We'll take all the assessments and the employee experience scans that you have, and we'll baseline it, and we'll show the improvement in whether it's subjective or objective information that a company may have about a particular group. So whether it's quantifiable easily like sales or customer success, where you have CSAT and NPS that can go directly up within your customer base because the relationships are better, churn goes down because success is doing a better job. The amount of expansion goes up because success is doing a great job, easily quantifiable. You're exactly right. When you roll it down into some less quantifiable performance roles, marketing, finance, it is about being objective and subjective to the way that the company has done it in the past with prescription on how you can do it forward. If you've never done an employee assessment, let's devise one together. We have a baseline of a Q20 and a Q30 that can allow you to gauge where people are struggling.
Okay, that makes sense. How are you seeing the technology age and Gen X group that's now entering the professional workforce more and more? How is that? How is their performance or their I'm trying to think how to word this properly, but how is the way that because they operate differently than I'd say than my generation. And how is that affecting overall performance and morale and happiness in the workplace? And I mean, how does that?
It's a really interesting question.
Together?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's part of the reason why we have our company, right? To help answer that, to help find answers for that, to help find solutions for that. More importantly, so let's take a look at some of the facts. Stress is directly, the amount of stress felt is directly equated or directly in line with age. Okay. But it actually is the inverse of what you might think. Maybe not. The older you are, the less stress people feel. Okay. Now, at a certain age, that makes sense. Maybe you're retired.
Sure.
Right. But our generation, doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Right. But when you start to think about what you brought up with technology and everything, and you take that as fact, that's from the American Psychology Association. And you take that fact and then you couple it with technology, phone, don't have mine here.
Distractions.
Being intentional.
Yeah.
You can start to equate why stress may be in bigger role, right? So we know it impacts you more the older you are. Okay. We also know technology is more prevalent the younger you are. Okay. Let me ask you something. Addicts. Do they seem like they're very anxious and very stressed?
Yeah.
Okay. Do our phones and are our phones maybe the most addictive thing in everyone's life?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And the technology in it, which is 100% needed, and I will never argue against, it's built to be addictive.
Right.
So there could be a correlation between that technology and stress levels felt.
Sure.
Let's take that could be out of it. That technology keeps us all so distracted.
Absolutely.
Why don't we have it in here? Why are ringers off? We're not even in the room because we have to be really intentional about what we're doing. Right.
That's right.
Right. Well, that happens less and less with people throughout the world. It happens less and less with families as kids are raised and developed because of this thing the Germans call hurry sickness. But we're all busy. And that technology allows us to do so much more than we used to be able to do. It also creates so much less engagement, person to person, than it used to. I don't know about you. When I get to talk to people, I feel less stressed.
I would definitely agree with that.
So there are a lot of real reasons why technology has
Caused more stress in our life.
Mm-hmm.
It increases the pace. You know that someone can be immediate in a response, and they know that they can be immediate in response. So you could be feeling it because that person could be putting pressure on you. That's undue. Or you could be feeling it because you're putting it on yourself just because, oh man, I know they know I could respond.
Right.
Be honest here, like the minute I got past a regular frontline manager, I never had time to respond to individual contributors' needs right away, right? Unless it was in my urgent, important bucket, right? And that kind of goes in line with being performant, is understanding that urgent and important, and understanding that the busier you are, that actually means the slower and the more intentional you have to be about everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
Navy SEALs put it as slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? But it really is that way in life. So with older generations feeling less stressed, there's a lot of reasons why that could be. My belief system is that as you get older, and what we've built into our performance system, as you get older, you get more intentional about your engagement, right? You get more deliberate about what you're doing. You seek out getting to do more things rather than having to do things. And I feel like the younger you are, the more you feel like you have to do things, whether you're a child being told what to do, or whether you're a young adult thinking this is the way it has to.
And that all those stresses together
lead to what the APA says, which is that the younger you are, the more stressed you feel. And the younger you are, the less experience you have with knowing how to deal with that stress. So we can see how we're kind of perpetuating itself with a device that makes you feel more urgent and more stressed and more anxious, and less intentionality about being taught how to deal with stress and anxiety. And it's just getting worse and worse, I feel, as we go further on, which is, I feel we got a really great opportunity to make an impact. That's what we're here to do. It's great going to market to companies. It's great seeing individual companies like Zendesk talk about the performance improvement they saw from 90 minutes with their entire North American success organization. 95 people, 90 minutes over 2 days, and testimonials about real results that they've seen in less than a month.
That's incredible.
But it's also, how do you get that to make an impact? We also bring this to education, to teachers, and then to students.
Right.
Because if you're not going to get taught from your parents, because the world is that hectic and maybe they have less knowledge about it than they used to, where are you going to learn it? So we've created something that I really think can impact the world. And we have a goal, a million lives impacted with this performance system. We know if we can do that, that some of the big challenges we see in this world today, disconnection, apathy, disengagement, lack of passion, those start to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny when you were talking about communication relieves stress, right? It made me think of when I first started at the company you and I used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
I had come from Morgan Stanley, kind of a buttoned up corporate environment, and I got a complaint about a success coach from a client, and I did what I'd say most people normally would do. I forwarded it to the success person, put his manager on it, copied his manager on it, and whatever, kind of a snarky email, I'd say, because I was annoyed that now this is making me look bad because it's this and that. And 10 minutes later, I look up and David Bonney's standing there with the success coach, and say, hey, have you met so and so? No, I haven't. Shake his hand, and he just said, hey, let's talk about how we're going to fix this for the client. And immediately, my frustration with what happened went way down, right? And then we were just looking towards a solution as opposed to, and we worked through it and everything. But I tried not to handle those types of situations the same way, without going and just talking to the person, getting face to face. And it's incredible how many, and that's an example of something that could have been, was a negative situation, right? but the impact of just having that day-to-day communication with the people and building, because that builds relationships, right? And relationships can build trust and can build a sense of unity, which is I would think a big part of what you guys are helping with.
100%. I'm a big believer that there are no good or bad situations. There's just situations, right? Don't get me wrong. There are consequences and there are rewards, right? And there's a big distinction between those two. But the reason why I look at that is a mindset thing. Okay. There are plenty of times in life where we have to go deal with a customer success agent because they aren't handling the customer right, and the customer's mad.
Yeah.
And I had to hear about it from the customer, and I did my job to get this all done when I sold it. Why can't you do your job to get them on board?
Right.
When the truth of the matter is, if you look at every situation as a situation, there are times that I feel that way. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I try to feel is that situation is a chance where I have an opportunity, or I get to go interact with someone else and learn something from them or help them with something. And part of my therapy, which I went through for a bunch of personal stuff, taught me 99.999% of the time, people aren't doing things to you.
Right.
They're doing things and you're just caught in the crosshair.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So when you couple those two things, a business practice of, trying to have a positive interaction with everybody you're working with that people aren't doing things to you in the global therapy, personal aspect of it, right? The fusion of life and work, right? When you look at that fusion, my mindset, I try to all the time be in a growth mindset.
Okay.
And that growth mindset means that I am consistently seeking out opportunities to challenge myself, to grow. And I run into far less problems than I used to. When you and I worked together, specifically the first couple of years at Infusionsoft, when I think you started in 2010, right? I was there 2008 to 2010 selling. And in those years, I was going through a lot of growth personally. And I was just starting to apply some of it professionally. But man, different person, disconnected, lack of self-awareness, lack of intentionality, just there to make money.
Sure.
And it showed. If I had something I had to do like Christmas for my kids, I was top of the board. And if it was June and there was nothing around the corner and nothing to do, and I didn't really care much about, just anything other than meeting my monthly expenses, and I did enough to be
Enough to get by.
decent sales rep, right? Top 20%, top 30%, but not near the top, never consistently, never a Corey Snyder.
Right.
Corey Snyder has that drive and that intentionality around sales. What I discovered with sales is my drive and my intentionality is around influencing people. What I've discovered as I've gotten older and I've really defined my purpose around influencing people is to make them more performant.
Right.
I know I've been given a skill set, and I know I've been given an opportunity through the adversity that I went through younger to be able to develop that skill set. And I believe I and my partners have a unique ability and collection of background and intelligence and experience to say, look, follow this path. And no matter who you are, where you are in life, CEO of Amazon,
right?
Jeff Bezos, down to my 16-year-old just trying to get through high school, right? It will improve your performance. And that's what we aim to do. And if you're at that 16-year-old level, or you're at a equivalent teenage level in your professional career, this can be the path to really accelerating your individual career inside, outside of work. And as an organization who we sell to, whether you have 20 employees or whether you have 200 employees, if each one of those individual bubbles gets bigger, your company bubble gets bigger.
What do you think what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see a lot of leaders making in making their teams less performant?
Coaching to the team.
What do you mean by that?
So as a sales manager, you've been there, I've been there. You've got a number over your head.
As a sales
Director, you've got a bigger number with more people over your head.
Mm-hmm.
As a sales VP, you've got a bigger number with more people over your head.
Okay.
As a CRO, you have the entire number and more people.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you go up that ladder, the percentage off is a much bigger number overall.
Sure.
So therefore, you don't miss your number as often.
Right.
But that first layer of management, where you have 10 people, 8 people, 5 people, and that number that rolls up to you, it weighs heavy on sales managers' heads.
Absolutely.
Especially when it is your family that
Yeah.
you're providing for,
Yeah.
right? Well, there are global attributes to sales that everybody needs to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
And there are global attributes to selling a product within a company that definitely everybody needs to be taught.
And then there are individual skills that need to be uncovered, individual opportunities for development that need to be uncovered.
There are individual challenges and stresses that need to be uncovered. There are individual intrinsic opportunities that need to be uncovered. So when you lead, managers tend to focus on that number.
Yeah.
And they tend to lead to that number. So if you're a big part of that number, you're going to get a lot of help and you're going to get a lot of attention.
If you're a lesser part of that number, you're going to be focused on
to try to drive up, but you're going to be focused on to try to drive up around the team number, generally speaking. What's lost in that whole entire equation is the individual.
Yeah.
So when I say coach on an individual level, I mean that very specifically. A very big part of leadership is setting a vision. It has to be done for a team.
Huge, right?
Right? It's setting a mission. That has to be done for a team.